My husband called me screaming to come home immediately because his entire family had shown up at my dacha, the country house I'd inherited from my Russian grandmother, and were demanding I hand over the keys. He expected me to rush back and surrender my property to keep the peace. What he didn't know was that I was sitting in a lawyer's office 300 kilometers away, signing documents that would ensure his family never set foot on my land again, and that our marriage was about to end in a way that would cost him everything he thought he was entitled to. The phone call came at 10:47 on a cold Saturday morning in March. I was in Moscow, in the offices of Volkov and Associates, one of the most respected property law firms in the city, when my phone started buzzing with that insistent vibration that meant someone was calling repeatedly, desperately. I glanced at the screen. Dmitri, my husband. 5 missed calls in the span of 2 minutes. "Excuse me," I said to Elena Volkova, the sharp-eyed attorney sitting across from me, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against a folder thick with documents. "I should take this." She nodded, her expression knowing. "Of course." I stepped into the hallway, the thick carpet muffling my footsteps, and answered. "Dmitri, I'm in a meeting. Get home now." His voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Right now, Anya. My mother is here, my brothers are here, and they're saying you've locked them out of the dacha. What the hell is going on?" The dacha. Of course it was about the dacha. My grandmother's property, 2 hours outside Moscow, wasn't just a country house. It was 40 hectares of pristine land bordering a lake, with a main house built in the 1950s, a guest house, a banya, gardens, and enough forest to lose yourself in for days. My babushka had acquired it during Soviet times, through circumstances she'd never fully explained. Something about her father's connections and a well-timed favor during the war. She'd maintained it through the collapse of the Soviet Union, through the chaos of the 90s, through every upheaval that had torn Russia apart and rebuilt it. And when she died last year, she'd left it to me. Only to me. Not to my mother, not to my aunts, but to me, her youngest granddaughter, the one who'd spent every summer there as a child. "They're not locked out," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "They were never locked in. They don't have keys because they don't live there, and they have no right to be there." "No right? Anya, that's my family. My mother wants to use the dacha for Easter, and you know it's tradition. It's tradition in your head, Dmitri, not in reality." I kept my voice level, professional. "Your family has used my grandmother's dacha exactly 3 times in the 5 years we've been married, always without asking permission, always leaving it a mess. This is my property, mine, not ours, mine. We're married. What's yours is mine. That's how marriage works." I almost laughed. Almost. "Actually, Dmitri, that's not how marriage works in Russia. Not when property is inherited, and not when we signed a marriage contract specifically keeping our assets separate. Remember? The contract your mother insisted on because she was so worried I might take something from your precious family?" Silence. Long and loaded. "Elena Fyodorovna drew up the contract herself," I continued, referring to his mother by her patronymic, the formal Russian way, because this conversation had moved far beyond casual family discourse. 5 years ago, she sat in our kitchen and told me that a woman from my background, the daughter of a school teacher and a factory worker, needed to understand that I had no claim to Volkov family wealth. So we signed papers that clearly state my inherited property remains mine alone, including the dacha. That was different. How? How is it different? Your mother wanted to protect what she saw as her family's interests. Well, congratulations. She did. And now my interests are protected too. The dacha is mine, legally and completely. And I've had the locks changed." "You what?" His voice had gone dangerously quiet now, the shouting replaced by something colder. "I changed the locks yesterday, and I've hired a caretaker who lives on the property full-time. His name is Grigori, he's a veteran, and he has very clear instructions about who is and isn't allowed on the grounds." "Anya, you're being unreasonable. My mother just wants to celebrate Easter there. It's important to her." "Then she can celebrate Easter at her own dacha, the one in Peredelkino, the large, expensive one that your father bought her." "That's being renovated right now. You know that. Not my problem." I was surprised by how calm I felt. how clear, like I'd been walking through fog for years and had suddenly stepped into sunlight. Dmitri, your family has treated me like an obligation for 5 years, a disappointing acquisition who didn't bring enough to the marriage. Your mother has made it clear at every opportunity that I'm not good enough for you, not wealthy enough, not connected enough, not cultured enough. And now that I have something of value, suddenly we're supposed to share? Suddenly what's mine is yours? You're my wife. Am I? Because your mother introduces me as Dmitri's wife, like it's a temporary position I'm filling until someone better comes along. Your brothers ask me to serve tea at family gatherings like I'm the help. Your father has never, not once in 5 years, asked me a single question about my life, my work, my thoughts. I'm decoration in your family, Dmitri. Uncomfortable decoration they wish could be replaced. More silence. I could hear voices in the background. His mother's sharp tone. One of his brothers. "Where are you?" Dmitri asked finally. "I told you, in a meeting." "What kind of meeting?" "The kind that doesn't concern you." I paused. "I'll be back in Moscow tomorrow. We can talk then. But Dmitri, your family needs to leave my property. Now. Or I'll call the police and have them removed for trespassing." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. I stood in that quiet hallway, surrounded by the muted sounds of a law office on a Saturday morning. Distant phone calls, the hum of a printer, someone's heels clicking on marble, and felt something crack open inside me. Not breaking, opening, like a door I hadn't known was locked. When I returned to Elena Volkova's office, she looked up from the documents she'd been reviewing, her dark eyes assessing. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. "Let's continue." The story of how I'd gotten to that office, to that moment, had started 3 weeks earlier at a family dinner that had finally pushed me past the point of tolerance. It had been Dmitri's mother's birthday, a lavish affair at their apartment in central Moscow, the kind of gathering where everything was performed for an audience. Elena Fyodorovna, my mother-in-law, held court like a czarina, accepting gifts and compliments with practiced graciousness, while her husband, Sergei Ivanovich, played the role of proud patriarch. Their 2 other sons were there with their wives, women from appropriate families who navigated the social dynamics with ease born of similar upbringings. And then there was me, Anya Mikhailovna, the teacher's daughter who'd married up. "Anya, dear, could you help in the kitchen?" Elena Fyodorovna hadn't asked. She'd stated, "Svetlana and Irina are busy discussing their children's international schools." I'd gone. Of course I'd gone. 5 years of training had taught me to go. But as I'd arranged the kuski on crystal plates, pickled vegetables and cured fish and expensive cheeses, I'd listened to the conversation filtering in from the dining room. "Of course, the dacha situation is perfect now," Elena Fyodorovna was saying. "With the old woman finally gone, we have access to the property. I've already made plans for Easter. The priest from Sergei's hometown will come. We'll have a proper celebration." "Mother, that's Anya's property," Dmitri had said, his voice uncertain. "From her grandmother." "Technically, perhaps, but you're married. What's hers is yours, darling. That's how these things work. Besides, it's wasted on her. She doesn't even use it properly. No entertaining, no networking, just sits there reading books like a peasant." The laughter that had followed, casual, dismissive, had done something to me. I'd set down the knife I'd been using to slice lemon, my hand completely steady, and I'd walked into the dining room. "I'm going home," I'd announced. Dmitri had looked up, confused. "What? We haven't even had dinner." "I'm going home," I'd repeated. "And Dmitri, when you're ready to have an actual conversation about our marriage and your family's behavior, you know where to find me. But until then, I'm done being the help at these gatherings." I'd walked out, gotten a taxi, gone back to our apartment, and started making plans. The first call had been to a lawyer friend from university, Katya, who'd listened to my story and given me Elena Volkova's number. "She specializes in property law and divorce," Katya had said, "and she doesn't lose." The meeting with Elena had been revelatory. She'd reviewed my inheritance documents, my marriage contract, Russian property law. "Your position is extremely strong," she'd said. "The dacha is solely yours. Inherited property with clear documentation. Your marriage contract reinforces separate assets. He has no legal claim whatsoever." "What about if he fights it?" "Let him fight. You'll win. But Anya, I need to ask, is this just about the dacha, or is this about the marriage? I'd sat with that question, really sat with it, and I'd realized the answer had been obvious for a long time. Both. It's about both. So we'd begun the process, documents to formalize my sole ownership beyond any question, a caretaker to prevent unauthorized access, and filed that very morning divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences and requesting immediate separation of all assets. By the time I left Elena Volkova's office, carrying copies of everything in a leather portfolio, I felt lighter than I had in years. Free. The word kept echoing in my mind. Free. I took the train back to Moscow that evening instead of waiting until Sunday. When I arrived at our apartment, a place that had never felt like home, always like Dmitri's space I was borrowing, he was waiting. "We need to talk," he said. He looked haggard, older somehow. "My mother is furious. She's talking about lawyers, about contesting the inheritance." "She can try," I said, setting down my bag. "She'll lose. I've just spent 8 hours with one of the best property lawyers in Moscow, ensuring exactly that." "This is insane, Anya. Over what? Over my mother wanting to use the dacha for a holiday?" "No, Dmitri, not over that. Over 5 years of being treated like I'm not good enough. Over being asked to serve tea while your sisters-in-law discuss their lives. Over your mother planning to use my property without asking because she doesn't believe I deserve the respect of being consulted. Over you never, not once, defending me to your family. That's not fair, isn't it?" I moved to our bedroom, started pulling out a suitcase. "When did you last tell your mother she was wrong about me? When did you last stand up and say, 'Anya is my wife, and you will treat her with respect'? When did you last choose me over keeping the peace with them?" He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. I packed methodically. Clothes, books, the few things I actually cared about. Everything fit in 2 suitcases. 5 years of marriage, 2 suitcases. That said something. "I filed for divorce," I said as I zipped up the second case. "You'll be served papers next week. The terms are simple. We each keep what we brought to the marriage, plus what we individually earned or inherited during it. The apartment is yours. I never wanted it anyway. My dacha remains mine. We split the joint account down the middle, which, honestly, is barely anything since most of our money goes to keeping up appearances for your family." "Anya, please." His voice had cracked. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll talk to my mother. I'll make her understand. You've had 5 years to talk to your mother, Dmitri. 5 years to make her understand that I'm your wife, your partner, someone worthy of basic respect. You haven't done it yet. You're not going to start now. I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the smart girl you rescued from her humble background, the project who was supposed to be grateful for being elevated to the Volkov family circle. But you don't love the actual me, the woman who has opinions and boundaries and property of her own that she won't just hand over to make your mother happy." I'd taken my suitcases and left. Stayed with Katya that night, listening to her curse Dmitri's family in colorful Russian, while drinking tea and eating honey cakes her babushka had made. The divorce had taken 4 months to finalize. Dmitri had tried to contest the dacha ownership, briefly, until his lawyers told him he had no case. His mother had hired her own attorney to explore options, only to be told the same thing. The property was mine, completely and legally, and no amount of Volkov family influence could change that. I'd moved to the dacha full-time, quit my job in Moscow working for a nonprofit, and started freelancing, doing grant writing and translation work remotely. Grigory, the caretaker I'd hired, was a godsend, a quiet man in his 60s who maintained the property beautifully and whose presence meant I felt safe alone in the countryside. The first summer there alone, I'd stood on the porch of my grandmother's house as the sun set over the lake, painting everything gold and orange, and I'd finally understood what she'd been protecting all those years. Not just property, not just land, but possibility, freedom, the space to be fully yourself without performing for anyone. I'd planted vegetables in the garden she'd tended, repaired the banya with help from Grigory, painted the guest house, invited my mother for long visits where we cooked together and talked about my grandmother, about the strength of women who survive, about how property isn't just money, it's autonomy. Dmitri had tried calling a few times in the months after the divorce was finalized. I'd never answered. What was there to say? He'd made his choice every day of our marriage, choosing his family's comfort over our partnership. I'd finally made mine, choosing myself. 1 year after that phone call, that order to get home now and surrender what was mine, I was sitting on the same porch, drinking tea and reading, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Anya Mikhailovna? A woman's voice, young, nervous. My name is Olga. I'm married to Dmitri's younger cousin, Pavel. We met once, briefly, at a family gathering. I remembered her vaguely. Quiet girl, looked uncomfortable. What can I do for you, Olga? I need advice. About property law. And about, she'd paused, about dealing with the Volkov family. I inherited money from my uncle, and Pavel's mother is pressuring us to invest it in a family business venture. And I heard what you did, how you protected what was yours. And I wondered if you could tell me how, if you could share your lawyer's information. I'd smiled, looking out over my land, my lake, my future. Of course, let me give you Elena Volkova's number. And Olga, don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting what's yours. That's not selfishness, that's survival. After we'd hung up, I'd sat for a long time thinking about my grandmother, about the choices she'd made to keep this place, about how property can be a prison or a liberation depending on who controls it, about how the most valuable thing you can inherit isn't land or money, but the knowledge that you deserve to take up space in the world without apologizing. My phone buzzed with a text. Katya sending photos of her daughter's birthday party, asking when I'd visit Moscow again. Normal life, friends, future. I texted back plans to visit next month, then set the phone aside and returned to my book, to my tea, to the sound of wind through birch trees and water lapping at the shore. They'd wanted me to come home, to surrender, to give up what was mine, to keep peace in a family that had never made space for me. Instead, I'd found my real home, and I'd never been more at peace in my life. The dacha remains mine, the land remains mine, the choice remains mine, and that, in the end, is worth more than all the acceptance the Volkov family could ever offer.